I have spent a lot of time following the US elections, starting with last year's primaries. If my US American viewers wonder why I, as well as so many other people from all over the world, care so much about your politics, well, they do matter quite a bit to the fate of this globe, don't they? Although I don't envy you for the choice you have to make this time around, you can call yourselves lucky that you at least have a say in it. First, the obvious observation. This year's two big candidates are incredibly flawed, each in his or her own way. I don't like either of them, although I do have a preference. I'll get into that later. My take on the 2016 election, in short, you're fucked. Donald Trump. A lot has been written and said about him. As selective, manipulative, and biased as much of the wall-to-wall anti-Trump propaganda may be, I agree that the possibility of a reality TV personality like this becoming President of the United States of America is a national embarrassment. His rudeness, his flip-flopping on positions whenever it's convenient, his outrageous lying are being noticed and ridiculed worldwide. His behavior, both as a businessman and a person, is the manifestation of the 20s caricature of a cynical, self-serving capitalist. I'm absolutely convinced that Trump is not the people's candidate he likes to pose as, but a sleazy snake oil salesman. He is taking advantage of the widespread distrust of US institutions because that's what people are concerned about and like to hear. However, he's not to be blamed for his rise exclusively, as pompous and hollow a conman as he may be. He is the product of a corrupt, dishonest, frustrating political system that voters have tried to end one presidential race after another. The longer this election dragged on, the bigger a benefit of a doubt I started to give Donald Trump. Story after story broke in which controversies were created that simply weren't fair or true. His misquoted comments on Mexicans are one example, the fake outrage about his response to Hillary's propaganda tool that was a dead soldier's father is another. This gave the man the veneer of the underdog, the tell-it-like-it-is guy and champion of free speech, although he himself acts as butthurt over quite mundane criticism or satire as any 20-year-old student crying for a safe space ever could. Although he moved the Republican Party to the right significantly during the primaries, and although I disagree with 90% of his political proposals, I have a hard time taking him seriously, let alone view him as a credible threat. Even his crazy stance on issues such as climate change seems like a minor concern in this election, simply because this entire race turned into a clash of characters, an evaluation of which candidate is the most morally bankrupt one. I'm repeating myself, but it's almost impossible to say which issues he actually sincerely cares about, if there are any at all. I may look back on this one day and blame myself for not reading the warning signs correctly, but I'd be shocked if he even tried to act on half of his proposals, if his sudden pandering to the political and Christian far right was anything but opportunism. And I'd be even more shocked if he managed to get any of his more outlandish ideas passed, even if he wanted to. His policy proposals are what a child would think of. Illegal immigration, build a wall, a big one. Climate change, we've had a warm summer, didn't we? International terrorism, bomb the shit out of them. Strategy, well, it's a secret, but it's gonna be tremendous, believe me. But do you know what I'm not afraid of at all? The idea of him at the button, as at least one article each week fearmongers. How big an idiot you may think he is, he most definitely has a vested interest in this planet to last. That goes for both candidates, by the way. But if I was an American citizen and not only a spectator, I'd be more worried about his willingness to cater to the most backwards elements of my society. His stance on abortion is one example. As conflicted as I myself am on that issue, he was acting irresponsibly when he entertained the idea of criminalizing it during the primaries and basically refused to answer a follow-up question on this in the presidential debates, merely stating that he'd like individual states to make their own decisions. Although I don't believe that he's actually in favor of penalizing abortion, he does have the potential of being the Vladimir Putin sort of politician who's willing to stand by while people are being persecuted for doing what should be their right to do in the first place. What about his international politics? One day he's talking like an isolationist, the other he's discussing bombing and torture. I happen to think that this world would be better off if NATO stopped expanding further east in Europe and Russia and the West established some ground rules of peaceful coexistence. That's by no means a one-way street, and I won't put my trust in Trump on this one. At least he isn't escalating this in his rhetoric like another prominent candidate is doing. Speaking about her, let's get to Hillary Clinton. In a normal race against another more or less established candidate, she would be facing a level playing field. With Donald Trump, she doesn't. He is at a disadvantage because he doesn't have the donors she has, because he doesn't have the mainstream media support, because he doesn't have any political experience, because he talks like a 10-year-old, and because he would make anyone look sane and moderate in comparison. His big advantage is that he has more or less a clean shirt politically. Sure, it looks like he's a scam artist as much as he is a businessman, but all his past dirt is of a private nature or has to do with sleazy business practices. It's not political. He is scum, if I may say so, corrupt scum, a scam and scum artist. But he didn't create or maintain the system he used, he took advantage of it. And he doesn't shy away from admitting it. He also has a weird charm and manages to get a chuckle out of even the biggest critics because he is just so outrageous. Clinton, on the other hand, is, again, pardon my rude language here, some of the worst and most dishonest, holier-than-thou, posing as human trash Washington has ever created. She is what people hate and should hate about their politicians and the political system in general. A self-serving, donor-beholden, lying, pseudo-progressive warmonger. A woman who half-heartedly panders to progressive voters while ultimately serving no one except for herself and, to a lesser extent, her donors. She doesn't have anything going for her except for the fear of Trump, which is why her campaign pulled strings to push GOP extremists, Pied Piper candidates they were called, months before the Republican primaries even started. They knew that she would have a hard time winning if she ran against a moderate, well-mannered Republican. If you happen to be a die-hard anti-Trump person and fear that he's going to bring fascism to your country, what does the willingness to elevate him tell you about the Clinton campaign? I don't want to comment on her past as First Lady, nor am I going to blame her for the sins of her husband. Looking at her political work since she became Secretary of State is all I need. She armed both Libyan as well as Syrian rebels, including Islamists. A mistake you might have made in Afghanistan in '79, but certainly not after this backfired so impressively and repeatedly decades later. Her financial ties to Saudi Arabia and Qatar and donations from these countries while and after her State Department increased weapon sales to them are telling. Her involvement in the sale of 1/5 of US uranium to Russian companies close to the Russian government while receiving huge donations from Russian donors are telling as well. Coincidence? Possible, but I highly doubt it because she chose not to disclose these donations to the government, although this had been agreed upon when she became Secretary of State. She personally pushed for the intervention in Libya, which France had been longing for years. She made the removal of Gaddafi possible by using lies about him ordering his troops to rape civilians. A rumor that even Human Rights Watch called bullshit on back then.
Yes, we came, we saw, he died. Did it have anything to do with your visit? No, oh, I'm sure it did.
In spite of her own ties, she uses the scarecrow of evil Russia as if she had been frozen in the Cold War. As power-hungry an international actor as Vladimir Putin is, he strikes me as a comparably intelligent and common-sense guy in international politics. That's mainly due to the fact that I am very pragmatic when it comes to foreign policy and agree with the German journalist Peter Scholl-Latour, who said,
Wie wahrscheinlich der Blödsinn mit diesem internationalen Gerichtshof. Früher, wenn ein Diktator wirklich unbequem wäre, hat man gesagt, wir geben ihm eine Villa an der Côte d'Azur, ein bisschen Geld dazu und lassen die Leute in Ruhe. Heute hat er die Perspektive internationalen Gerichtshofs und dann kämpft er bis zum letzten Blutstropfen.
But that's the consequentialist in me. And most importantly, Hillary Clinton is almost certainly a criminal. The last couple of weeks' WikiLeaks publications have shown how she's running her campaign, smearing and influencing people left and right. They have more than hinted at a massive conflict of interest between her roles as a politician and head of the Clinton Foundation. It really looks like her politics are for sale, no matter what customer we are talking about. It's only an emerging pattern at this point, and hopefully the FBI is going to conduct an actual investigation of her business dealings in the upcoming months. Combine this corruption with the firm grasp she's had on various journalists and media networks, the massive support she's gotten in spite of her scandals, and you got yourself a candidate who really isn't getting challenged that much. Say what you want about the dictatorial nature of Donald Trump's character, he at least gets a beating for the stupid shit he does and says. And I expect this to continue if he is to become president. President Clinton, however, might very well rule without receiving this level of scrutiny. As dramatical as this may sound, I believe that Hillary Clinton poses a greater threat to the very fabric of what is left of the United States democracy than Donald Trump ever could, simply because she's going to be a more effective and deceptive president than him, and because she is the candidate of special interests and Trump is not. So, who to vote for? If someone put a gun to my head and told me to vote for either of the two, I'd say, shoot me. No, seriously, I'd vote for Trump. Not because I like him or his politics, but because I think that he is going to be a rather impotent president, even with a Republican majority of Congress. However, my position as a European is this. With options like these, you should vote third party. I certainly would, and I'm fully aware that a vote for Gary Johnson is one vote less for Donald Trump, and a vote for Jill Stein is one less for Hillary Clinton. If you are absolutely convinced that one of the big candidates is so terrible, he or she just has to be stopped, this may seem like a wasted vote. But it really isn't. Elections are about more than the next 4 to 8 years. They are about the future of one's country. Introducing third parties to a political structure is a long-term project. It helps democratizing the electoral process, even if this makes more complicated coalition governments necessary. Trying to move an entire party where you want it to be is almost impossible, no matter the will of the people. The example of Bernie Sanders has shown this. Trump may have challenged the Republican establishment by winning the primaries, but he has also broken the party in the process. And how it's going to reassemble remains to be seen. So my reluctant advice to all my American viewers is this. If you're not happy with either of the two candidates, view this election as an opportunity to vote your consciousness. Let third parties get above 5% and strengthen them in the long run. I certainly would. The point is not to stay ideologically pure, it's to change the political landscape. I'm the Thoughtful Contrarian. Feel free to rate, comment, share and subscribe.